Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining Fairly Critical's review of Star Wars A New Hope. If you're wondering why we are looking at almost a 50-year-old movie, this is the start of our series on IMDb's Top 100 Movies, updated as of 2022. My sister gave me a whole list of them, a poster with scratch-off icons, so whenever I watch one, I can scratch it off like a lottery ticket, except for you can't win money. So it's basically the same thing as the lottery. I am joined for the first time by a good friend of mine. This is Andrew. Andrew, I see your mouth. It's fantastic.
Hello.
Good mouth. You're leaning real. There we are. Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Okay. So the little Discord video box is apparently deceptive.
Okay. Yes, I could see.
I thought I was in the whole frame.
Oh, you're in the whole frame now. I just have to actually click on your face. I'm sorry. I was looking at the.
I was gonna say, like, I can see his whole face.
Yeah, that's because I'm having to do something weird. So, for those of you guys watching the video, for some reason, we are doing this call on Discord, and for some reason, Discord doesn't want to show my video. So I'm having to record that separately. It's going to look weird. Hopefully I'll have that figured out next time. But yes, Andrew, when I click on your face, I can't actually see you whole. I'm definitely going to show the people just your mouth, though, for the first 5 minutes so I don't look crazy.
That's fine.
Yeah. But Andrew is a good friend of mine. You may, if you're a friend of this channel, you've heard me talk about MalcolmPunches channel on a handful of occasions. I did a recording with him. Andrew and I are currently recording a Pokemon Infinite Fusions with Malcolm for his YouTube channel. That'll probably be out here in a couple of months. So you guys will hopefully get to hear a little bit more of Andrew, even if you don't see more of him. But I'll put a link to MalcolmPunches channel if you guys are interested, and Andrew and I will be on that in a couple of months. We are also joined with Mia from SignalFire Studios. Hi, Mia.
Hi. Hello.
So if you guys can't tell, Mia prefers not to be on camera, which I totally get and understand. If you guys are excited or like watching videos of animated skits coming to life, how they're drawn, how they're brought together, Mia's got an excellent channel where she just creates her own animated stuff. She's also working on a webcomic on her Instagram. There will be links to both her channel and her Instagram in this description if you guys are excited. But because she does not like to be on camera, what I have done is record some of her videos on YouTube, and I'm overlaying them over her camera shot, so you guys can get a little taste of what she does and go check her out. So thank you guys both for being here. We're all Star Wars nerds. Speaking of which, we are recording on May the 4th, so May the 4th be with you, both of you.
And also with you.
And also with you.
So let's just dive on into this. We are talking about New Hope, or just Star Wars if you're a fan of the original title. And I mean, gosh, it's crazy to think it was out in 1977, so it's 46 years. It is older than any of us.
Hadn't considered that until you brought it up, and yep,
it
certainly is.
It is. I mean, it's been remastered several times. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have to keep locked guards on the vaults, that way George Lucas doesn't sneak in and make additional edits. But
I just need one more CG scene. One more.
It'll look like a PS2 cutscene. I promise.
I've been talking with my friend J.J. Abrams about lens flare.
Oh my God, J.J.
No.
Let's not talk about the sequels.
No, we're not going there.
We're only talking about New Hope. And I mean, what a way to start out this series. What a way to start out the film. I mean, immediately you're hit with John Williams' score. I mean, just immediately you're hit with it. And I mean, it is iconic. It sets up so many leitmotifs that are used throughout it. And what's funny to me, I didn't even realize this, the Imperial March is not in this movie.
That is correct. It doesn't premiere until episode 5.
Yeah. It's maybe the most iconic, but I mean, the the opening crawl, the opening sequence of the do 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 do. I mean, it's so good. I love that so much.
So
Goosebumps
very good.
every time.
Yeah.
Right. Just it's fantastic to watch. I love listening to John Williams stuff. He's in my opinion one of the greatest composers of the modern era, easily.
Yeah.
Just he knocked it out of the park with this one, and then proceeded to knock it out of the park with every subsequent Star Wars film, because he doesn't know how to not I guess give his all when it comes to scoring something.
I mean, it is his job, to be fair. I guess we should. He's amazing at it, but I mean, you know, I'm glad he gives his all to the thing that pays his to the thing that pays him. Yeah, I mean, and it's so iconic. It's such a good score. It leads you to just, I mean, what a revolutionary. I mean, it's not the opening. It's not the first movie to ever do an opening text scroll.
No,
but I mean, with the angled look and the Star Wars just blaring on screen and John Williams' score, I mean, it's certainly one of the best.
It in my opinion, it says something where if you really become familiar with the score, you really become familiar with the music, you can listen to the music and you can just imagine each scene in your head as you're listening to it. Or maybe that's just me. Yeah. But I did reach the point where I just listened to the score over and over again. And even at the kind of quiet parts, you know exactly what's going on at any given moment. And it's so well done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it leads into the opening scene too. Mia, what do you like about the opening scene?
Oh my word. Okay, what is there not to like about the opening scene? It's okay. So when I was little, first time watching it, right? It's like, whoa, spaceships, you know, like the regular, like it looks amazing.
Yeah.
And then like later on, when I understood all of the work that goes into actually making a movie, I got really interested in learning about like the behind the scenes of how this movie was actually made. And the opening scene and the way they did this and the technology that they created to do this for the first time.
Yeah.
It's revolutionary.
Yeah.
100% yes. Yeah. The fact that George Lucas went into this with barely any budget, and in the process of making this film launched Industrial Light and Magic, which would then go on to basically handle all the special effects, all the best special effects for the next, 5 decades, is rather telling.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing too is, so the original Battlestar Galactica miniseries that NBC put on. So they hired, I forget his name, but he was like, one of the production designers and directors for Star Wars. And he brought all of that tech over to do some of their scenes and was immediately sued for it. Immediately had to stop doing it.
Wow.
Because it was revolutionary. Like you said, Mia, it had never been done before. Nowadays it seems almost trivial because we're 50 years later and, visual effects and special effects have come just so far. But I mean, back in the day, no one had ever seen anything like this.
No.
This laid the groundwork for how sci-fi should be filmed and how sci-fi special effects and visual effects should be done.
I dare say we would not be where we are, like movie-wise and just like technologically when it comes to the movie industry. We would not be where we are if it were not for this movie.
I mean, I don't have any evidence to back that up, but at the same time, I don't disagree with you.
In some ways, obviously, not in every way.
I mean,
because there's also plenty of other movies that also had like revolutionary aspects to them, but in some ways,
I mean, I think you're correct about that. I don't think you should even really have to qualify that. I mean, this is really the first movie that brought sci-fi into the mainstream, and sci-fi movies are known for their special and their visual effects. It's and so to have a movie that could come in here, capture the imaginations of not just one generation but several generations of people, and and really lead the way for giant blockbuster versions of Star Trek or miniseries like Battlestar Galactica, or half a million, it seems like, ripoffs of Star Wars that everyone was trying to do to copy it. You're totally correct. It's not like any of us can point to it and say this specific technology came from Star Wars, but the interest came from Star Wars, and the willingness to put money into it, I think, came from Star Wars. So, and I mean, in the scene too, not just the technology that goes behind that scene. Just well done to George Lucas and his cinematography team, because it leads right into action. I mean, it's just text scroll, amazing music, battle, and not just battle, but cuts to inside the ship where there's just these two droids walking about as security officers run panicked. I mean, what a way to introduce your galaxy and your world building into this, is just say, hey, we can eat our vegetables later. Right now, look at all the shooty. And it's so good. It's amazing. You immedially feel like you've got to catch up and invest yourself in this. It immediately grabs your attention. And I mean, this day and age, everyone talks about being able to grab your attention. Star Wars was doing it 50 years ago, and it, by and large, has never stopped, I don't think.
I would agree. I think one of the ways that it managed to do that is, and possibly due to limited budget and only had so much time to shoot stuff, Lucas did not spend a lot of time explaining anything in the film, right? He just let it exist as it was.
Yeah.
He let the set pieces speak for themselves, let the characters speak for themselves. About the only bit of explaining we get is a little bit of background on the Empire, a little bit of background, when Obi-Wan is telling Luke about the Force, and we get this little, it's an energy field that surrounds us and binds all things together. But for the most part, it's just like, hey, this is just how things are. And we're not going to explain how the hyperdrive works. We're not going to explain how this or that works. We're just going to let it be.
Right.
Here's this fully realized universe. Get lost in it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the text scroll has some exposition. I mean, that's what the text scroll is there for. And there's some exposition throughout the film, but it's not like it's dragged down by it. And I think that's a testament. I was having a conversation earlier today, and not to upset any Star Trek fans, because I do like Star Trek, but I think that the difference between the Star Trek universe and the Star Wars universe is that the Star Wars universe lends itself to very different stories being told.
Oh, absolutely.
And the Star Trek universe it's really all just Federation space. You know what I mean? No one has really sat around and thought about what would this be like without the Federation or whatever. I mean, Babylon 5 is a Federation outpost on the frontier. Not Babylon 5. I'm sorry. Deep Space Nine. I do that all the time.
Different franchise.
I do that all the time.
Another excellent sci-fi franchise, by the way.
Right.
But
no, I do that all the time. It's just Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5. I always do that. But I mean, Star Trek Next Generation, all of it has to do, and most of it has to do with the Enterprise. I mean, it's like they don't even go away from the singular ship. Not that that's a bad.
true.
Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, Star Trek knows, it's a mainstay of that IP. But Star Wars has never, at least with the expanded universe and the novels and everything, I know the movies are a little bit different, but
the movies are all about the Skywalker saga.
The movies are all about the Skywalker, and I understand that. But I mean, the books and everything, and the expanded universe, where there was like multiple different eras of the Star Wars universe that you can explore with Knights of the Old Republic, the game Knights of the Old Republic, the Galactic Civil War era, in the prequel trilogy, and the Clone Wars, and all the shows that have come out about that, all the video games. I mean, it's just, the Star Wars universe feels so big that you could live in that universe and never know what is going on half the time.
Right.
From a story perspective, not from a story perspective, but just from a news perspective. It's so big that you could always feel like, the center of the galaxy until you hear about someone else's story. And I think that's a testament to this. I think it's just, this movie started it all, and it captured our imaginations, and the imaginations of several generations, and let people run off with it.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about kind of no exposition. Can you imagine how different the movie would be if the deleted scenes of Biggs and Luke were left in?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how different this movie would be? I mean, think about what is in those scenes. The battle's going on overhead, and Luke, it shows Luke down on the planet looking up at it, so you'd have to cut away from the action to look at this random blonde-haired dude in a desert with binoculars, yell at a droid that then proceeds to blow up on him. Go into town, talk to Biggs, who really gives him his first call to action. Biggs is the first one to tell him, "Hey, you should come with me, join the Alliance."
Right.
So if he would have done that, then that call to action later by Obi-Wan would have been just completely redundant. And then, I mean, it would have just slowed. It would really have slowed things down. There's a couple other points in those scenes that you get, but I mean, it just, I like the scene. That really, it does, at least at the end, give you a little bit of a better connection to Biggs before he dies. But
yeah, I was gonna say, you understand why Luke's so upset about it,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a benefit, but I mean, can you imagine the opening being any different than what it is the question.
The pacing would have been not like entirely ruined, but it would have felt off.
Wouldn't have helped.
If it had slowed down just for that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I was watching it too, and this obviously, and I will personally touch on this more in this recording, but I mean, it's funny because Biggs talks about Tatooine as if it's permanently under Imperial control, and that's weird to think about because in every other source of media out there, the Hutts control Tatooine.
Right.
So I mean, the entirety of the canon material and the Legends material, which is by far superior to the new canon, would have been completely different if that scene was in there. No one would have been like, "Oh yeah, the Hutts control this," and the Hutts probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Which makes sense because for being a really powerful gangster, Han Solo is really flippant and really glib with Jabba at his hangar.
But I mean, that's Han being Han. That's Han's personality right there. He he doesn't like to show fear to anybody.
You're not wrong, but I have to admit, I'm watching this and he steps on Jabba's tail. And all I'm thinking is that man should have died. That should be death right there.
That's the value of high charisma, man. Obviously, even Jabba likes Han enough to not immediately disintegrate him for losing his spice. It's like, no, you just owe me a bunch of money.
Yeah, Han my bookie. Yeah, but I mean, what else could we? I mean, anything else that we should talk about with those deleted scenes? Because I like them. I'm just glad they're not in the movie.
It's
right.
It's a fun little thing to see afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, this is where it could have gone, and here's a little bit of extra exposition and a little more context for the relationship between Luke and Biggs.
Yeah.
But in the end, I am glad it was left out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was good to cut out. And as much as they brought the Jabba scene back in with the newer editions of the movie where they could CGI in Jabba, I think it was a really good decision to cut it out originally, seeing as how the original design for Jabba was basically just some fat dude.
Yeah.
like not, instead of the iconic space slug gangster that we get later.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, this is probably better to wait until you had the money to put into your prop department on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny too, watching Han step up, and it's very clearly just a CGI version of Han sliding up and down. I mean, it's
right. Oh gosh. Speaking of bad CGI.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've seen
and
worse.
Han.
I've seen worse. We can all remember the time that Superman had his mustache
Oh.
Jim Cavill had his mustache.
Oh
gone.
gosh, no. I was thinking specifically in relation to the film. Again, when we talk about the remastered versions, and George Lucas's unfortunate attempt to rewrite history.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. George Lucas does his best, and then his best is not good enough for anyone, including himself. So he goes back and he adds more. But I mean, it's
just
go ahead.
Han shot first.
Han shot first.
Han shot first.
and he should have been allowed to shoot first.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So going back and like, no, we'll just CGI his neck moving in a way that no human neck could possibly.
Yeah, Han is actually an alien. And honestly, that's the funny thing to me is like, I know why George Lucas did this. Heroes shouldn't shoot first, but at the same time, maybe this is, I was going to say, maybe this is just 50 years later. Some of us have a different view of what heroes should be than what it was. But this is the 70s when trust of the government was at an all-time low and everyone was questioning everything. So frankly, I mean, if there was any time where a hero should have shot first, it very clearly Greedo was going to blast him. It's
right. It's funny that you would bring up, when the movie came out, right? In the 70s, like you said, distrust in the government at an all-time high. Something that I didn't fully appreciate until my wife went through like films in politics class. They apparently, up until Star Wars, like the films of the 70s are all really depressing. You don't find very many with very happy endings. No. Whatever happy endings there are usually bittersweet in some way. So Star Wars comes through as this breath of fresh air that's literally, as much as it wasn't called A New Hope at the time of its release, it was kind of a new hope. It was like, here's just this unabashed good versus evil struggle,
right?
And the good guys win, and it's awesome. It's feel good all around.
Yeah.
And I get why Lucas later on, because that's obviously the idealism that he was wanting to inject in there with the whole hero shouldn't shoot first. My argument there is Han's not a hero yet at that point in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's at best an anti-hero. He's a reluctant neutral party. And he grows into being a hero by the end.
Right.
But definitely was more in line with his character to have absolutely shot Greedo first,
absolutely.
Which he did.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And honestly, the definition of which I'll have to do a video on what it should mean to be an anti-hero, because I don't even think Han would qualify as an anti-hero. I know.
You're right. He really wouldn't.
I mean, I get, because everyone kind of qualifies anti-hero in their own way, which is essentially,
It's such a broad definition for anti-hero.
Yeah, very few people have actually sat down and thought about what an anti-hero should actually be. And yeah, I think by most people's definitions, they would call him that, because really it seems like by most people's definitions, it's whoever you're supposed to be rooting for, even if they do questionable things. And really,
right.
He does that out of pure self-interest. He's a smuggler.
Mm-hmm.
He is purely selfish, and there's nothing heroic about being purely selfish. I mean, there's something to be said for self-defense. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, Captain America would have probably shot Greedo too if he had to.
Right.
I'm not saying that just because he shot Greedo first means that it was evil. No, but his character is purely self-interest at this time in the movie. And so
I would say he's more of a buffer than an anti-hero to Luke's altruistic.
He's a foil.
A foil. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. To Luke, and arguably Obi-Wan's as well. Let's help everyone. Let's do the right thing. Always.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely is the foil to both of them.
Yeah, he's the sarcastic, world-weary Lancer to Luke's idealistic. Yeah, I'm going to get off of Tatooine and go be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Luke is the paragon. Luke is the monomyth.
Yeah.
Luke is the traditional hero for the hero's journey. And
another great influence of Lucas's.
I mean, it's I think we all know that. We'll probably talk more about it as we get through the video, but I mean, before we even get to the cantina scene, we get to what is, in my opinion, the funniest line of all of Star Wars. I don't know if you guys know this joke or not, but if you do, feel free. Shout it out right now. Any guesses?
Such precise markings can only be Imperial
Oh, yes.
stormtroopers.
That is 100% correct. That is the funniest line in all of Star Wars. It is
because Obi-Wan says it, and we never see it.
No. At no point do we ever see
Anywhere.
it. No. I mean, Mia, tell me, when do the stormtroopers aim straight? When do they hit?
Okay. Okay, so I have sort of strong opinions on this. Not super strong. Like,
Excellent.
I don't care if other people
Excellent.
disagree.
Go for
But
it.
I would say they're not terrible shots. And when they are, they're not, there's different theories. Obviously, they can't aim very well, usually. But one theory, and one I like, is that specifically, like, when they had a clear shot as Luke and Leia are, like, trying to escape, get back to the Millennium Falcon on the Death Star, right? And they're being chased by stormtroopers, and they have the stormtroopers have a very clear shot at them. Like, it shouldn't be hard to miss.
Yeah.
And they very clearly and obviously missed them by a long shot. But at the same time, this is a prisoner that he is escaping with, a very high, a very, like, high priority prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they were shooting and trying not to hit her, like, I mean, okay, I guess there's holes kind of in this because obviously they have stunning capabilities.
Yeah.
Right.
So why not just try and stun them?
Well,
But then another theory is they can't really see through their helmets, which, I mean,
true. Those helmets were not designed for function; they were designed for intimidation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is funny because there's a part in the movie where, you know, Luke goes, "I can't see a thing in this helmet." That was not scripted.
Exactly.
That was not scripted. Mark Hamill thought the camera had stopped rolling, and so he goes, "I can't see a thing in this helmet," and they left it in because it was funny.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
that is rather fantastic.
And so, like, they probably couldn't even see in the first place.
Building off of that, Mia, you bring up an excellent point. That's a good kind of fan theory. And building off of that, we know that they let them go, right? Even Leia says, like, yeah, that was too easy. They let us go. There was a tracking device on the Falcon that the Empire used to find the Yavin base. So it could have been that, oh no, their orders were make it look convincing, but don't actually kill anybody.
No, I mean,
and convincing just so happened to be missing very obviously.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's what I think that's where that falls apart is you can make it look convincing, but an actual trained military probably doesn't have as many people die as they did in that Death Star.
That's very true.
The kill counts are almost astronomical. It's ridiculous.
Although, again, we also know that the Empire's, like, one of their prevailing military doctrines is we have the numbers.
Yeah.
And
we
in
have
the reserve.
one to spare.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I think, and this harkens back to an issue that I have. This might be one of my few issues with the movie as a whole, and really the Star Wars series as a whole. I mean, the infantry sucks. The infantry can't hit anything from time to time. When they get to the Death Star, there's no combat air patrol. There's no, at the end when there's like 30 fighters coming to them and they have to wait till halfway through the battle before they start launching their own fighters. There's no combat air patrol. It's just, this is a problem for me personally, just because I'm a real military guy. Like I love military history. It's one of my hobbies. I watch a lot of stuff over military tactics and proper military doctrine. And And it helps when I'm watching real movies too, but it's real nitpicky for me because I'm just like, Star Wars really needs a military advisor. they're not good at having a realistic military.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Although, in a way, again, it's one of those probably influenced by expanded universe content over the years, trying to help explain away these problems, and a healthy dose of willing suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, there it is.
There's the idea that the Emperor, he's one at the point of episode 4 of the first Star Wars film. He's the Empire is there. They are in control. It's not disputed. That's why there's a rebellion. It's not like there's a sovereign nation fighting against them or anything. So they're basically just there to keep people in line, and the Emperor himself, being super paranoid, didn't like having too many competent people around him.
I mean, again, that's all expanded universe.
He sent his he sent his absolute most competent commander off into the unknown reaches.
Yeah. I mean, no, you're not wrong. There's expanded universe stuff that we can explain away about it. But at the same time, just from a movie perspective.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean,
I get off topic.
It's okay. I mean, we love this we all know what we're doing here. We're all here for a reason. But at the same time, like from a movie perspective, what is important about having a realistic military is, one, getting people invested. When the enemies don't make logical sense, it kind of takes you away from it. Now, don't get me wrong. When I watched this the first time, I mean, granted, I was a kid, but anytime I watch a movie the first time, unless it's just egregiously awful, are you pointing this out the first time you watch it? Probably not.
No,
but
you're sucked in and you're enjoying it.
Right. But on the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, however, a dozen times we've watched this movie over the course of our lives, you start to notice things like that.
Yeah,
and that's
you start to notice the cracks in the paint.
Yeah, and it can take you out of the experience sometimes. Again, I mean, there are movies where it's egregious and you can't help but be taken out of it. But two, what it does when you have a realistic military, a military that actually looks like it poses a threat, is it makes the good guys look awesome. It makes the good guys look like they're actually effective. And to its credit, I mean, other than not having a combat air patrol at the end, which is absolutely stupid, but a lot of the rebel fighters do die attacking the Death Star, and it does make the Death Star look a little bit imposing, but the infantry still sucks. The infantry is still awful. But anyway, we'll move on. I mean, and you kind of talked, well, I don't know. Now I'm thinking, we talked about this, but we'll come back around to this. I'll make sure we come back around to that, because I do want to talk about that exiting the the Death Star fight with the TIE fighters and everything. But before we do that, now would be an excellent time to talk about lightsabers, because
oh gosh,
awesome.
Yes, lightsabers. Oh, lightsabers. Who doesn't love lightsabers?
Who doesn't make lightsaber noises with their mouth?
Right? Even the actors can. Well, I can't speak for the original film, but I do know that by the time of Phantom Menace, Ewan McGregor apparently kept making lightsaber sounds with his mouth while they were filming that.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, it's, and I love the fact that here's this iconic weapon of Star Wars. It's so cool. It's basically, it's a sword, but it's a laser sword, right? It hardly gets used in the film.
No.
Obi-Wan shows it off. We get to see Luke training with it a little bit. Then there's the single most anemic lightsaber fight in Star Wars history.
So funny.
Yeah.
As two old dudes just kind of stiffly rotate their torsos back and forth like Rock'em Sock'em robots or something.
Yeah.
And that's it. Ta-da! That's all you see of the lightsaber. But even with that very limited glimpse, everybody wanted a lightsaber. Like, I wouldn't believe a single person that watched Star Wars, like, at least after their first time, if they said, no, I didn't want a lightsaber. Who wants that? No, everybody does.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a lightsaber. It's the coolest fantasy sci-fi weapon that's been developed.
It is. I mean, it is. And you're right. It does look like, two elderly gentlemen just kind of poking at each other with long sticks.
To be fair, I don't know if Alec Guinness in any way signed up for stunts.
No, I mean, but no, you're right. But thank God it gets better immediately. Empire Strikes Back has an awesome one.
Yeah.
And I mean, the lightsaber combat evolves so much over the point. I think it was probably the best. I mean, as much as I hated episode 8 because it was abysmal, the
fight choreographies are so good.
I mean, if you go back and watch them in slow-mo, someone screwed up a couple times. So this is a complete segue, and I will bring it back, I promise. But go watch the fight scene in episode 8 after they kill Snoke and they're facing off against the Imperial Guards.
Oh.
Which is a cool fight scene. But there's a moment when a dude with 2 daggers has Rey in one arm with a dagger to her throat, and he has another blade in the left hand. You see it when she gets trapped, and very easily he could have just poked her in the stomach from there. They CGI'd the dagger out. Because it was very clearly she's dead, and they had to not let the main character die.
Oops.
It was a very big oops. It is a really cool scene and everything, and I don't want to detract from it because it's one of the few good scenes in that movie. But it now I can't unsee it. So you all have to suffer with me now. Congratulations.
Dang it.
Great.
Well, I'll still enjoy
like
the
that
edit
anyways.
of that fight that's done to the I Need a Hero. That's a rather fantastic edit.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and I think outside of that, with lightsaber combat involved, I think that's the thing that I miss the most about combat. Yeah, sorry, there's a Halo joke.
You can't help yourself, man. You gotta sneak in a reference somehow.
But Hayden Christensen, as much as we all kind of feel bad for Hayden Christensen, especially with the dialogue that he had to go through in episodes 2 and 3, Hayden Christensen was an awesome lightsaber combatant.
Oh yeah. Oh man. That Anakin versus Obi-Wan fight is just so good.
It's amazing.
So good.
If you guys are interested, there is a 2-hour long video by Shadiversity where he breaks down that lightsaber combat scene. He's a swordsman.
Oh, yeah.
He's a swordsman.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
It's amazing. Seen it. Have you seen it, Mia?
I have. I'm subscribed to him on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
great videos.
I love
Shadiversity. I hadn't seen that one yet though, so I'm gonna have to look that one up.
It's so cool. I mean, and I love the guy for being able to do take something that I think was like 8 minutes of screen time and do a 2-hour review over it. And I really appreciate him for that because it's really cool.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, lightsabers are so iconic, and I mean that just aids in the idea of just how important this movie was and how it captured the imagination of the people in 77, because that was so cool. But and then you get immediately following that fight, you get the TIE fighter scene, which I mean, what an awesome! I was watching that, and I never realized how many cuts they put in that. I mean, it's like a cut every second and a half. And I mean, it's just between Leia and Chewbacca in the pilot seats, kind of looking out the windows with nervous looks on their face, and the visual effects of a camera pulling out around models of the Millennium Falcon as TIE fighters drop in, and the sound effects, and again going back to John Williams' score comes in.
You're talking about that, and I'm hearing it in my head right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, and if you watch that scene and you watch how like space combat is done, I mean, that really kind of wrote the script for space combat, not in Star Wars specifically. I mean, there's a lot of cuts. If I'm being honest, it's almost dizzying if you just go in and look at the cuts and everything. I think they cleaned it up a little bit in future films, but I mean, that is the script. That is the foundation of space combat in the Star Wars universe. And by extension, all sci-fi. So
Helps it feel on the edge of your seat, high octane.
It does. It does. I mean, there's the cuts make it feel actionable, even if a little bit dizzying, which is supposed to be fair. I mean, the inspiration behind that was essentially if you treat the Millennium Falcon as a B-17, a flying fortress, and the fighters as World War II Messerschmitts. That's the inspiration behind that scene. But what's important about it narratively is that's the first time all 6 heroes are A, together, and B, of one mind, and of a singular focus. The 6 heroes at that point, they've only been 4 and 4. You only had the droids and, well, I guess 5. Leia was not with them, but you had the droids and the Chewbacca and Luke and Han together at one point, and all of them always bickering with each other. And then when Han and Chewie and Luke and Leia meet up, Leia's barking at them all the time. And also Han's giving it back too. I don't mean to say that Leia's a problem in that scene. They're both very they're both strong-willed characters, and they go at each other. And it's great. And I love but you know, this is the first time where they all sit down and say, okay, and it's not like anyone sits there and plans their whole team together, but they're all actually contributing towards the same goal for once. And it's cool. And that's the turning point of the movie, because at that point, the heroes had never won. Tanta 4 at the beginning, disabled and invaded by stormtroopers, who in the only military action of the entire original trilogy won. And then they kill Luke's parents, or uncle and aunt, and then they make the Millennium Falcon flee, both on the ground and in orbit. They blow up Alderaan. They make them go down a garbage chute. They're chasing them. I mean, while we talked about they suck at shooting, but they're the ones in control throughout the entirety of the movie until that point. And yeah, you can argue, well, they let them go because they had the tracer and everything. They still shot down 4 TIE fighters.
Right.
So, I mean, and it's important because it goes into that's the transition point, because we're going into the final act where they're going to take on the Death Star. So it's an important transition point for that movie, and it's an awesome scene, and the score is great. The editing is great. The visual effects are great. I mean, it's a great scene. It might be one of the best scenes in the whole movie. It's certainly probably the most important scene in the whole movie. But I want to talk about a different scene, which is the admirals, when Darth Vader and Moff Tarkin walk in and the admirals are bickering.
Yes.
So good.
Someone other than me talk first, because I'm going to suck all the oxygen out of the room on this one. Mia, you go first. Talk to me about it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Darth Vader was obviously introduced before this. We got a little bit of him, but this is where he really shined.
I agree.
Like, you see the true amount of power that he has. I love the shot where Tarkin tells him off, like, quit it, you know.
Yeah.
Stop choking him to death.
Yeah.
And Vader turns, says, "As you wish," and then lets him go. He's not even, he started force choking him with, using his hand. And then by the time he turns away, he's not even facing the dude.
Right.
It's so intimidating.
It is. It's incredibly intimidating. I agree. Andrew, go again. Or you go now. I'm seriously, I'm gonna suck the oxygen. I love this scene so much.
Yeah, no, I can't help but agree with everything that Mia said. It's a fantastic introduction to Vader as a villain, beyond that scene in the Tanta 4. Because, like I said, you get to see his power. As you mentioned, he's choking the guy, and then he doesn't release him until after he tells Tarkin, "As you wish," as if to say, like, okay, I'm going to take orders from you, but also I can kind of just do what I want.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm only doing this because I feel like doing this.
Yeah.
So at no point do you really get the feeling that Tarkin's the one in charge. It's really Vader, you know, as it kind of should be.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm so excited.
Also, and it's another one of those cool moments where Lucas allows the film to show something instead of telling of the idea of the Force. Because, before that moment, before he starts choking the guy, it's like, oh, your sorcerous ways can't help you now, Lord Vader. Hasn't granted you clairvoyance enough to do this. And then he's just, with nothing more than just a gesture, literally cuts the guy off.
Yeah.
Including his air supply.
Hard to talk when you can't breathe.
Right, exactly. It's like, you know what? And that gives us a glimpse at this otherworldly force before we ever really have it explained to us. Before I think it's actually our first showing of what the Force is or is capable of doing in the entire series.
Yeah.
It's just choking a guy out.
Well, it's certainly the most direct. I mean, you get the scene where Luke, blocks a few, blaster bolts with a shield over his face. I mean, and that's okay, great. It guides your actions, but also follows your commands. But then you get to see it follow his command. That's when Obi-Wan's like, yes, it guides your actions, but it can also follow your commands. And then Darth Vader's just like, yeah, watch this. hold my cape. And starts choking the guy. And it's great. And I think, going back to your show don't tell thing, all of these are admirals. You get an ISB officer, you get Moff Tarkin, and they're all like talking about how superior they are and what's going on. All of them get nervous looks on their faces whenever Darth Vader starts choking the insolent one. And it's beautiful. It's almost like Tarkin forgets that he's supposed to stop this. Tarkin, going back to what Mia said, I don't think Tarkin remembered for a second that he's the one who's supposed to be in charge of Vader.
Right.
He's just like, oh shit, we lost another one. And then he's like, oh wait, no, I can stop him. Vader, release him. Like, it's such a good scene, and he's so calm about it too. I mean, we get as obviously the full mythos of the Jedi wasn't written at this point, so it's not like we knew Sith Lords are all about passion and rage. We get that later on, especially in Empire Strikes Back and in Return of the Jedi. But at this point, it's just, I find your lack of faith disturbing. And then immediately...
such a good line.
It's such a good line, and it's delivered so well. Such a good line. And it's delivered so stoically and so calmly. And it's just, you get the idea that Darth Vader thinks nothing of just casually murdering top admirals. Just absolutely no qualms. And Mia's right. He had been introduced earlier on, but this is the moment when you're like, oh crap, this dude's a villain. Such a
as
good
if the
scene.
black suit and black cape didn't give it away earlier.
Right, and the heavy breathing.
Yeah.
Is he really a bad guy? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he just murdered it. The first time you see him, he's walking through a bunch of dead bodies. The second time you see him, he strangles a dude by lifting him 6 inches off the floor and throwing him into a wall. But this is the moment when you're like, okay. Everyone should be afraid of him.
Right.
Not just the enemy. Everyone should be afraid of him. Because on a whim, you can say the wrong thing, and I mean, just out of respect for Tarkin, he stops. Not because he had to. Not because Tarkin could have done anything about it. Just, okay, fine. It's not really worth it to me.
And, on reflection, you mentioned how, like, this is a scene that establishes Vader as, like, the villain, right? When they made this film, at the time, they had no idea how well it was going to perform. Yeah. So while Lucas had the idea for more movies, there was no guarantee it was going to happen. But can you imagine sitting in the theaters and, here's just this brand new movie, Star Wars. You never heard of it before. It's this whole new thing. You're watching it. You see this Darth Vader dude. You're like, oh man, he's so bad. He's so evil. And you get to the end of the film and you realize they didn't kill him.
They did not.
oh, he escaped. Wait a minute, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, can you imagine, like, the immediate, like, I wonder if they're going to make more of these. Like, I want to see more of these.
Well, and that's the thing, too. At the time, it was very frowned upon to make sequels. People viewed cinema as, if you made a sequel, it was a cash grab. There's no good stories to tell after the first one. And then we got Empire, which I think is by and large, not everyone's favorite, but a good majority of the fan base's favorite movie is Empire.
It's arguably the best one, the best movie in the entire franchise. Arguably. My personal favorite is Return of the Jedi, but many people's opinions is that not Revenge of the Sith. Well, yeah, that one too. But that episode 5, 5 is the best.
Yeah. I love Empire Strikes Back. It was not my favorite growing up. New Hope was definitely my favorite growing up. And then as a young child, Attack of the Clones was my favorite. Nostalgia. Everyone, before you kill me in the comment section. Before everyone kills me in the comment section. It is the first one I saw in theaters. I have many a memory of waking up at 11 o'clock at night because I had a bad dream and going into the living room and seeing my dad and I falling asleep watching that movie. I understand it is not the best movie. It has nostalgia. Nostalgia has killed me on this, and I'm so sorry. Please don't kill me in the comments. But
nostalgia is one of the strongest forces in nature.
It is, and I do love that movie. I really do. I know it's got issues. I know the dialogue is gosh darn atrocious. So I know Hayden Christensen has the perv stare on lock, but you know what? I love that movie, and I love Rogue One. I think Rogue
One is so good.
I think Rogue One is actually my favorite Star Wars film, and I think out of the original trilogy, it's definitely Empire. But gosh darn, I love Rogue One.
Honestly, I would say that before Rogue One, I would have been in the camp of like Episode 5 is the best written and executed Star Wars film. And then Rogue One came along. I'm like, no, I think this one actually might be better.
Yeah. I mean, so good. And Rogue One, especially, kind of touching back on what I said earlier about me being a military history guy. Rogue One has military in it. Rogue One has the war in Star Wars. And I mean, it's just, and I love that. But this is not about Rogue One. We'll probably have to do a Rogue One review later. But
yes, I think this goes to show you that it's impossible to review these movies in a bubble. You know, like it's as much as we try to keep it to just Episode 4, that they have been a part of international culture for decades now. So it's just impossible not to start drawing on elements from the other films and talking about it, no matter how hard we try.
Right. No, I agree. And I mean, it is, I mean, this has been going on, this is almost 50 years, 46 years. It'll be 46 years old this year. And it has inspired so much. I mean, books, comic books, and in the 90s we had the prequel trilogy, which, love it or hate it, I understand it's got issues, but then we got the sequel trilogy, and I think everyone said, see, the prequels aren't that bad.
I won't deny I was big on the whole prequel trilogy suck, and then the sequel trilogies made me like, you know what, they weren't so bad. They
weren't so bad. And if you watch Dave Filoni's Clone Wars, the animated
I was gonna say
series,
and the Clone Wars animated series both softened my heart to the prequel trilogy a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
we've had those discussions, Jacob.
We have. The first 3 years of our friendship was constant bickering about the prequel trilogy.
So true.
From 2017 to 2020, I think it's just a continuous conversation.
Yep.
But I mean, and I think, you know, the prequels and the sequels, I mean, again, they're like poetry. They kind of rhyme, to quote George Lucas. But you get really the traditional hero story in the sequels, which Mia, you can talk more about that if you want to. We got a few minutes here.
The
hero's journey, the traditional hero's journey that Luke goes on.
Yes. So I love that in this movie you get the traditional hero's journey. And yet they managed to also sort of expand it into the rest of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Yes,
Not only that, but also
absolutely.
they introduce it in a new way as well. Because typically, like, especially if you think about the way the Lord of the Rings does it,
Mhm.
you start somewhere that the other characters are comfortable. You start with the known, and you're
Mhm.
introduced to, so like in Lord of the Rings, you start in the Shire after you get all the exposition and everything. And you
Right.
start with the main characters in the place that they know. Whereas in A New Hope, you start in the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get introduced to Luke. You start with the battle above Tatooine
Yeah.
with like chaos and shooting and like death and all of that, and
Mhm.
Princess Leia trying to escape in the middle of it. You get 3PO and R2 introduced, and they manage to escape, and then you get more of 3PO and R2 actually on Tatooine, and just beautiful dialogue between the two of them.
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
and then after they go their separate ways, you get introduced to Luke through them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's when you start in the known.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And I mean, you can't get much more unknown than literal space
Yeah.
in a
Right.
galaxy far, far away a long, long time ago. I mean, you're totally correct. And then I mean, yeah, it doesn't have all 17 phases of the hero's journey,
No.
but no
Yeah.
story has all 17 phases of the hero's journey.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But it has tons of them. I mean, it has the mentor. It has the call to action that is initially refused, and then, you know, the initiating action is taken. The mentor takes him off into the unknown. He meets the princess.
Mhm.
There's some, knowing how again, this goes back to not being able to watch this in a vacuum. At this time, Leia was not his sister when this was written.
Right.
So their flirtation, him trying to flirt with her is not nearly as creepy as it is now. And what's funny too is, you know, there's a section of the hero's journey where it's talking about the father atoning with the father or the mother or the abyss.
Mhm.
And it's a little literal with this franchise because the power over
Slightly on the nose.
Yeah, it's a little literal, but at the time it wasn't, because Darth Vader was not Luke's father when this was originally written.
Right.
And it actually plays really, really well because it's almost it's accidental perfect foreshadowing, because Obi-Wan, one of the first things he says about his father was he was the best star pilot in the galaxy. And then at the end of the movie, Darth Vader hops in a starfighter and takes and personally defends the Death Star twice and nearly kills Luke, and comes out of a barrel roll to make it into the second film. And it's accidentally perfect foreshadowing that that's Luke's father. Which you can't give George Lucas credit for doing that, because he definitely didn't do it on purpose. Like I said, it's accidental, but it works so well. And it's just, I mean, it's one of the things to love about this movie. Which, if you haven't seen it yet and you didn't know Darth Vader was Luke's father, that's on you. I'm sorry.
I was about to say,
that's your fault.
Isn't the statute of limitations on spoilers like 7 years or something? We're well beyond that point.
Beyond that.
Oh yeah.
But no, I mean, there's so much to love about this movie. So I mean, we're running short on time here. To wrap it up, one last question for the both of you. Why is this movie one of the best movies you've ever, just
other than nostalgia?
Yeah.
I think for me personally, I just love the show don't tell.
Yeah.
Like that, there are a few ways to get me riled up quicker about writing than if you tell something rather than just showing it. And that they're not super heavy on the exposition either. Like, they let you figure things out as it goes.
Yeah.
And they're okay with there being unanswered questions if it doesn't get a sequel.
Yeah.
So it just makes this, because they didn't go out of their way to explain every single detail the first time a question popped up, it left room to expand on this incredibly enormous universe that
Yeah.
we know and love today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every movie has exposition. This movie has exposition, but you're totally right. I mean, sometimes you got to eat your vegetables, but there's as minimal amount of them in this movie as they could get away with, and it worked so well. It wasn't bogged down. Its pacing is, I mean, the Dune Sea segment, there's a lot of it, but you can't look at that and say we need to cut some of this out, because they cut out enough. They cut out enough to keep the pacing going. We talked about the deleted scenes from earlier. It would have been a very different movie had those made it in. They cut out exactly what they needed to cut out. They left exactly what they needed to leave in. And eventually we got to a point where 50 years later, we're still talking about it. So I agree. I think that's great. All right, Andrew, you've had time to think.
Yeah. So I think Mia covered like a great reason for like why the film is good and stands the test of time. So I'll just talk about why I liked it. You know, when I remember when I first saw it, it was one of those fundamental films, one of those fundamental moments where it just sparked my imagination. It allowed me to see a glimpse of something bigger that I'd never considered before.
Yeah.
And just opening up the idea of, oh yeah, this, you know, adventures in space and alien creatures and cool technology and all this other stuff. It was like a gateway to a whole new line of thinking for little, what was it, 5-6-year-old me when I first saw it. And I like to think that might be true for a lot of people, you know, just because of how fantastical Star Wars is. We often call it science fiction, but I'd argue it's more space fantasy, you know, for just how open it is. And like you said, it has so many unanswered questions, but that's okay because it leaves so much room to explore, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you two for coming on with me tonight. We'll definitely do this again with some of the other ones when the time is right, but I appreciate the two of you talking with me about this. Again, if you liked Andrew, we'll be on Malcolm Punch's channel in a couple months together. Go check out SignalFire Studios. Link again in the description. Check out Mia's Instagram. Thank you guys again. Final remarks? Anything you want to say?
Thanks for having us.
Yep.
Especially to review this movie. Like, this is great.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yep. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to talk about this film. It was a fun time.
Great. Well, we will leave it there. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to watch. This is, again, like I said, a part of a new series that we're doing. Hopefully we'll enjoy it. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it and you'll tune in for the next one. I'm trying to get, there's 100 movies on the list. I'm trying to do one a month. So this is going to be several years in the making. Okay. That'll do it for us, though. Thank you guys again for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Share this with anyone that you think might also enjoy it. Leave a comment on why Star Wars, specifically The New Hope, is one of your favorite movies, because there's definitely no way that it's not. And subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. But for Fairly Critical, I've been your host, Jacob. For sorry, I just got a notification. I should turn those off. For SignalFire Studios, Mia has been Mia. And for Andrew has been Andrew. Thank you all again. Have a good night, and may the 4th be with you.